Welcome to the sleepy hours, a quiet space where dreams begin and worries fade.
Every raindrop falling on the jungle leaves carries a story, and tonight the rain will guide you to the ones only the forest remembers. The rainforest breathed in slow rhythm beneath a sky heavy with clouds. A hush had fallen, not of silence, but of a sacred quiet, a velvet stillness, where the wind curled through the canopy and each droplet of rain landed like a forgotten name. Leaves shimmered with wetness, draped in 1,000 shades of green, and vines clung to the bones of ancient trees like memories refusing to be let go. The rain was steady, not hurried, not harsh, but deliberate, as though it had traveled a long way to be here and had something to say. In the midst of this vast breathing world, a figure emerged from the mist, her boots brushing damp undergrowth, a weathered bag slung across her shoulder. Her coat clung to her form as the rain welcomed her like an old friend. She paused, lifting her face to the sky, eyes closed, lips parted slightly, as if listening not with her ears, but with something deeper. Before her stood a cabin, wrapped in a living shroud of ivy and moss, half forgotten, yet waiting. A single lantern flickered, within, barely visible through the foggy glass. She stepped toward it slowly, reverently, as if she had crossed some unseen threshold. And all around her, the rain whispered, not in language, but in feeling, in rhythm, in breath. Somewhere within that whisper was a voice older than time, watching, remembering. What if the forest remembers everything, she wondered? Not just seasons and sunlight, but voices, footsteps, laughter, sorrow. What if the leaves carry stories, and the roots keep secrets, and the rain, the rain sings lullabies no one has heard for centuries. As the door creaked open and shadows welcomed her, in the forest held its breath. Tonight it would speak again. There is a rhythm in the rain, not unlike breath, and if you listen closely, it will slow your thoughts to match the tempo of the trees. Just beyond the cabin, a soft wind stirs the ferns and nudges the curtains ever so slightly. Inside, the air is warm and still, laced with the scent of damp wood. She lies back in a hammock that sways with the grace of falling leaves, cradled by fabric and silence. Above, the roof holds off the storm, but the sound of rain fills the space as if it has always lived there. Each drop taps a gentle note, a lullaby in slow motion. She inhales deeply, the breath filling her lungs like morning mist curling over riverbanks. Then she exhales, long and unhurried, as if letting go of something too heavy to name. The forest outside breathes with her. The canopy shifts, releasing droplets in waves. A low rumble of thunder rolls across the sky, not with threat, but with reassurance, like a voice reminding her she is not alone. She closes her eyes and lets herself drift into the sound. The rain falls steady, the earth hums below. Her chest rises and falls, and slowly, the edge between waking and dreaming begins to blur. You are safe, she hears, though no one has spoken. You are here. Let the rain speak for a while. Let it carry you. Let it hold your worries until they dissolve into the moss. The hammock rocks slightly, guided by nothing more than breath and gravity. A drop lands on the windowsill with a perfect, rounded note. Another follows. She doesn't move. She doesn't need to. The rain is enough. The rain is everything. It washes the dust of memory and wraps her in something older than comfort, something primal, like belonging. Somewhere in the trees, a bird sings once and falls silent again, as though offering a benediction. And in this moment, surrounded by rhythm, by breath, by rain, she lets go. Her heart slows, her thoughts settle. The forest exhales. The days had begun to lose their edges. Time, in the rainforest, did not move in lines but in slow circles, like the rings hidden in tree trunks or the way vines spiraled gently upward in search of light. Dr. Ilara Miles had arrived 3 weeks earlier, carrying with her a suitcase of books, a worn leather journal, and a silence that had lived in her chest for years. She did not come here seeking adventure or answers. She came for stillness. The cabin once belonged to her mentor, a woman whose work in botanical folklore had shaped Ilara's early path. Long ago, they had spoken of this place over coffee and candlelight, when cities still felt like home. Now, the mentor was gone, and the cabin stood waiting, untouched, as if the forest had kept it in memory. Each morning began with the same rhythm. Ilara would wake to the sound of rainfall, that eternal hush, and stretch slowly beneath the wool blanket. Her feet would touch the cool wooden floor, and she would move through the cabin with the practiced care of someone living alone in a world made of delicate things. Her days were quiet and methodical. She catalogued leaves and studied mosses, her fingers brushing green textures, like someone reading an ancient language with the skin. Sometimes she would pause to stare out the window, watching steam rise from the soil and birds flit through shafts of light. She rarely spoke, not out of sadness, but out of reverence. Words felt too sharp here at night. She would sit on the porch with a cup of herbal tea, the steam curling upward to meet the mist. The rain would fall in waves, soft, then strong, then soft again, like a conversation just on the edge of memory. She would write in her journal, not about findings or hypotheses, but about feelings too quiet for the waking world. How the trees seemed to lean in when the wind passed. How the sound of frogs at dusk reminded her of a song she once knew. How it felt to finally have space to breathe. She thought of the years behind her, of broken relationships, of cities that never slowed down, of the loneliness that had followed her, even in rooms filled with people. She did not speak of these things, but the forest somehow already knew, and always, beneath it all, was the rain. It never stopped, not entirely. Sometimes it danced lightly, brushing leaves like fingertips. Other times it came in steady sheets, drumming rooftops and echoing through the canopy. But even in the rare moments of quiet, when no drops could be heard, Ilara still felt it hovering just beyond the silence, like breath waiting to be drawn. The rain was the one constant, the one voice that never asked anything of her, never demanded explanation. She often wondered what it might say if she could understand its language. If trees could speak, what stories would they tell? What memories did moss hold beneath its velvet surface? These were the questions that lulled her to sleep night after night, as the forest listened and the rain kept whispering. It happened on a morning soaked in silver mist, when the sky hung low and the forest wore its quiet like a second skin. Ilara was walking the loop she had traced a dozen times before. A trail carved by memory and routine, winding through undergrowth. and between trees she had begun to think of as old friends. The rain had softened to a fine veil, barely touching her skin, and each step left a whisper in the damp earth. She carried a small field pouch, collecting samples as she always did: fronds, seed pods, bits of lichen. There was comfort in the ritual, in the naming of things. But then, just past the curve, where the strangler fig cast its shadow across the trail, she stopped. Something was out of place. At first, it was nothing more than a flickerish shape, a glint, a slight difference in shade. But as she knelt, her breath caught. A single leaf lay among the others, but it was unlike anything she had catalogued before. Its surface shimmered faintly, not wet, but alive somehow, as though light moved within it. Its veins didn't follow any natural pattern she recognized. They wove in elegant, deliberate lines, like a script written by someone who had no need for paper or ink. She lifted it carefully, almost afraid to touch it. The leaf was warm, not with heat, but with something else, a memory, perhaps, or a feeling not her own. Back at the cabin, she placed it on a clean cloth and examined it under the soft glow of the oil lamp. She flipped through her mentor's old field guides, checked her own sketches, even scanned old monographs that lined the cabin shelves. Nothing. This leaf didn't exist, not in any book, not in any record, and yet it lay there, as real as the rain tapping on the window pane. That night, as the forest wrapped itself in thunder and shadow, Ilara found herself unable to sleep. The rain had changed. It no longer fell in background rhythm. It pulsed, it pressed against the windows like fingertips. It spoke not in words, but in pauses, in waves, in something beneath sound. She sat up in bed, the leaf still glowing faintly. On the desk, across the room, she wasn't frightened, not exactly, but something had shifted. The forest had been still for so long, and now it seemed to breathe differently. She lay back down, eyes open, listening. The rain fell, then paused, then fell again, as if in thought. She closed her eyes and let it wash over her. Perhaps, she thought, it's time to stop studying and start listening. Outside, the vines curled slowly around the wooden posts of the porch. The canopy shivered with memory. The leaf remained, untouched but impossible to ignore. And somewhere in the branches high above, the forest whispered something only the rain could translate. Morning arrived gently, with pale light filtering through the mist and the steady rhythm of rain tracing lines across the cabin's roof. Ilara moved slowly, her body heavy with dreams she couldn't quite recall. The leaf still rested on the desk, its colors dulled in daylight, but still marked by those mysterious veins. She reached for her mentor's journal again, drawn not to the entries she had read before, but to the pages near the back, those filled with looser handwriting, unfinished. Thoughts, fragments that seemed less like science and more like poetry. And there, nestled between sketches of fern spirals and seed pods, she found it, a passage she had somehow missed. The ink was faded, but clear. There are voices in the storm, it read, not hallucination, not metaphor. They do not speak in human tongues, but they speak nonetheless. I heard them only after the first leaf. I believe the forest holds memory. I believe the rain is how it remembers. Ilara sat in silence, the words echoing within her like distant thunder. Her mentor had heard them too. She hadn't been imagining it. The leaf wasn't just unusual, it was a key, or perhaps a message. She closed the journal slowly, the pages cool beneath her fingertips, and stood. Something in the air had changed. The rain no longer felt like background music. It was closer now, more alive, wrapping around her like a shawl of invisible threads. Later that afternoon, she followed a narrow trail deeper into the forest, one she hadn't taken before. The path was overgrown, veiled in vines, and thick with moss, as if it hadn't been walked in years. Yet something tugged her forward. The rain whispered above her, trickling from leaf to leaf like a waterfall slowed to a hush. She passed blooming. Flowers she didn't recognize, petals too vivid, edges too sharp, colors just beyond the spectrum she knew. Some pulsed gently, as if breathing. Others turned slowly as she passed, following her with silent attention. And then she found it. A tree, massive and ancient, its bark dark with moisture, stood at the heart of a small clearing. It was unlike the others. Its surface was carved not by weather or age, but by something older lines and grooves that shimmered faintly as raindrops slid along them. She placed her hand on its trunk. The bark was warm, and beneath it she felt a slow, rhythmic thrum, like a distant heartbeat. As her palm rested there, the rain around her shifted. It fell in waves to beats, then three, then one, a pattern, a cadence, not random, not storm, a message. She closed her eyes, letting it wash over her, and for a moment she swore she heard names, whispers that didn't belong to the wind, sounds that carried weight, like stories folded into syllables too old for language. Her breath caught. The forest was speaking, and for the first time she began to understand, not through thought, but through stillness. When she finally returned to the cabin, soaked through and breathless, she didn't speak. She simply lit a small lamp and opened her mentor's journal once more. A single drop of water fell from her sleeve onto the page. It spread slowly, touching the old ink. The words shimmered. The rain tapped against the windows. And somewhere beyond the trees, something waited to be remembered. The clearing was quiet, not from lack of sound, but from presence so complete, so full, that silence itself felt like a language. Elara returned there the next day, unable to resist the pull of that great tree. The path welcomed her this time, the vines bending slightly away, the moss feeling softer underfoot. Rainfall guided her, steady as a breath drawn deep into the lungs. When she arrived, the clearing looked unchanged, yet the air felt different, denser, expectant, like the moment before a story begins. She placed her hand once more on the trunk. The bark was damp and cool this time, but beneath the surface, something stirred. Not movement, not vibration, something deeper, like listening. She closed her eyes. The rain around her shifted again, not in rhythm, but in tone. It was no longer falling, it was speaking, softly, like voices carried by roots deep beneath the earth. And then she heard them, not in English, not in any human tongue, but she knew they were voices. A woman laughing beneath palm leaves, a lullaby sung to a child, a name called out in joy and again in grief. The memories came not in images, but in feeling waves of emotion rising through her chest. She opened her eyes, and for a moment, the clearing was no longer empty. Shapes moved between the trees, flickering like reflections on water. Figures with woven cloaks and bare feet, hands pressed to trunks, faces lifted to rain. Not ghosts, not visions, something older, something remembered. She stepped back, breath caught between awe and wonder. On the ground beneath her, the roots of the great tree stretched like veins through the soil, dark and wet and alive. She knelt, placing both palms flat against the earth. The voices grew clearer. They told of a people who lived not beside the forest, but within it, keepers of memory, singers of rain. They did not write history in ink or stone. They wove it into leaves. They whispered it into bark. They taught the trees to remember for them. That night, Ilara sat at her desk with her mentor's journal open before her. But something had changed. A new page had appeared. The binding was the same, the paper familiar, but the ink was fresh. The handwriting was unmistakable. Her mentors. She traced the words with trembling fingers. The forest never forgets. She leaned back in her chair, the rain murmuring on the roof above. Her grandmother's voice stirred in her memory then, unbidden, a lullaby half forgotten, from childhood, sung on nights when thunder rolled across the plains. Her grandmother had spoken of ancestral trees, of spirits living in the roots. She had always believed them to be bedtime stories, remnants of an older world. But now, with the leaf still glowing faintly in its place, and the journal open to words that should not exist, Ilara began to understand. The forest was not a place to be studied. It was a library of feeling, a cathedral of memory, a living, breathing soul. And yet, even with all it had revealed, something still felt unfinished, as if the story it was trying to tell her had only just begun. Outside, the rain continued, steady, listening, waiting. That night, the rain did not lull her to sleep, it carried her into it. As Ilara drifted into slumber, the sound of the storm wrapped around her like a shawl of whispers, and she slipped into a dream without edges, without time. She was standing beneath a sky that pulsed with color, not the blue of daylight, but a shifting prism of hues that had no names. Around her rose a grove unlike any she had seen in waking life. The trees here were impossibly tall, their leaves glowing softly as if lit from within. Vines sparkled with dewdrops that shimmered like stars, and petals bloomed in shades her waking mind could not have invented. There was no path, and yet her feet knew where to go. She walked barefoot through a soft carpet of moss, the scent of jasmine and soil rich in the air. The rain here was different. It fell in luminous threads, like silk unraveling from the clouds. Each droplet sang a single note as it touched the ground, and together they made a music too gentle to be called a song. The forest breathed around her, and she felt her heartbeat slowing to match its rhythm. Then came the voice, not loud, not startling, a child's voice, warm and curious, rising from somewhere ahead. Ilara, it said, as though the trees themselves had spoken her name. She followed, not out of fear, but wonder. The grove opened before her, like a memory blooming into view. She saw hanging vines that carried flickering images, memories, perhaps, but not all her own. Lovers dancing in the rain, a woman planting a seed, a family sheltering beneath a great tree, and there, among them, a moment that made her stop. She saw herself, not as she was now, but as a child barefoot, wide-eyed, standing in this very grove. She was speaking softly to one of the trees, her small hand resting on its bark. But the memory did not come to her mind. It came to her skin, to her breath, to her bones. She had been here before, somehow, long ago. And yet the memory had vanished from her waking mind like fog burned off by the sun. The child version of her looked up, met her gaze, and smiled. Not a dream smile, not an invention, a knowing one. As if to say, "We remember, even when you forget." Ilara stepped forward, her voice caught in her throat. She wanted to speak, to ask 1,000 questions, but the grove didn't require words. Instead, she placed her hand against the tree the child had touched. Its bark was warm, the same pulse, the same song. The vines above her shifted, and more. Memories bloomed in the air, some joyful, some sorrowful, all true. The forest had kept them, preserved them, protected them, waiting for her return. And as she stood in the center of the glowing grove, bathed in rainfall that shimmered like breath, Ilara understood something she had always suspected. Memories are not bound to the mind alone. Some live in roots, some in rain, and some wait in silence until we are ready to remember them. The morning came slowly, wrapped in mist, the forest softened by a silver hush. Ilara woke with a heaviness in her chest, not a burden, but the weight of something returned. The memory of the grove lingered behind her eyes, vivid and strange, like a dream that had always been waiting just below the surface. The image of her younger self, smiling beside that glowing tree, clung to her like dew. She sat up in bed and listened. The rain was steady, gentle, and within it, something hummed. A sound so faint she might have missed it, but this time, she didn't. A melody, soft, familiar. She rose without thinking, moving toward the window as the lullaby drifted through the glass. Not sung aloud, not carried by voice, but there, threaded between droplets. A song she hadn't heard in decades. Her grandmother's lullaby. It came back in pieces, like petals falling into place. The same tune once whispered to her beneath blankets. In a house far away from any forest. A song from a woman whose hands smelled of soil and whose stories always seemed too old for their time. She remembered now one summer, long ago, when she was very small. Her grandmother had taken her to a place deep in the wild. Not a cabin, not a research site, a sacred place, a grove. The details were still blurred at the edges, but the feeling was sharp. Holding her grandmother's hand, feeling the trees hum beneath her feet, speaking to the bark because her grandmother had said it could hear. The memory had faded with age, as childhood often does, but the forest had not forgotten. It had held the moment gently, patiently, like a seed waiting for spring. Elara sank into the armchair near the fire, the journal open in her lap. She flipped through its pages as the rain continued its song, and something caught her eye, a sketch she had never drawn. Her hand trembled slightly as she traced the familiar curve of that grove. The same trees glowing softly in ink, the same vines trailing from above. It had appeared sometime during the night, as if summoned from dream into paper. She touched the page. It was dry, but the ink still felt warm. For the first time in years, she whispered the lullaby aloud, just under her breath, not to herself, but to the forest, to the roots, to the memory that had waited for her return. The rain answered not with words, but with warmth. It wrapped around the cabin like an embrace. And in that stillness, Elara understood that her connection to this place had never begun with science or study. It had begun long ago, when she was small and the forest had first spoken her name. This bond was older than language, deeper than knowledge. It was feeling, it was remembering. She breathed in the scent of moss and wood, and as she closed her eyes, she heard it once more, the child's voice from the dream. Now clearer, now closer, we remember, it said, and Elara, with her hand resting on the pages of the past, whispered back, so do I. The path appeared just after dawn, where no path had been before. It wound through the densest part of the forest, past roots like knotted limbs and stones veined with lichen, as though the rainforest had parted its breath to reveal something sacred. Elara didn't hesitate. The leaf was tucked safely inside her journal. The sketch of the glowing grove still lay on her desk, but it no longer felt like a dream. It felt like a door. She followed the path as rain fell gently overhead, barely brushing her shoulders beneath the vast shelter of the canopy. The forest was hushed, but not silent. There was listening in the air, like a held breath. She moved without hurry, guided by something deeper than direction. The vines here were thick, ancient, draped with silver mist. The air shimmered faintly with light that didn't seem to come from the sun. Her boots pressed into moss that pulsed softly beneath her soles, like stepping across memory. And then, without warning, the trail ended. The trees opened into a wide clearing, and there, at the center of it, stood the tree. It was immense, its roots spreading like rivers in every direction, its trunk impossibly wide, its crown lost in the clouds above. The bark shimmered with patterns, glyphs, symbols, ripples of time, etched not with tools, but with patience. Rainwater traced these lines as it flowed downward, glowing faintly as it moved, like light following the shape of forgotten words. He stepped forward, drawn by a quiet awe. The air was thick with presence. This was no ordinary tree. This was memory incarnate. She reached out and placed her palm against the trunk. The forest exhaled. Voices rose, not one, not two, but many. A chorus. The sound did not echo from around her, but from within. Her heart began to beat in a new rhythm, slower, deeper. The glyphs beneath her fingers shifted with each drop of rain, telling stories in silence. She saw moments unfold behind her eyes, flashes of ancient gatherings, of rituals beneath moonlight, of laughter echoing through the branches, of sorrow laid at the roots. Generations upon generations, speaking through one another. And then she saw the future, not in detail, not in words, but in feeling. A forest renewed, a balance restored, people remembering what they had forgotten. Trees not as resources, but as relatives. And herself not separate from it, but woven into it, not as a visitor, as a vessel. The tree pulsed beneath her hand, and she understood. The rainforest did not speak to everyone. It listened patiently until it found a heart quiet enough to hear dark tears slipped down her cheeks, though she did not feel sadness, only wonder, only reverence. The rain fell softly now, like a blessing. She pressed both palms to the bark and closed her eyes. For a long while, she stood in silence, letting the voices of the roots, the rain, and the past move through her, until, at last, they quieted. Not because the story had ended, but because she had become a part of it. The walk back was slower. though not because the path had changed. It was the same winding trail, the same hush beneath the canopy, the same breath of green mist curling through the trees. But Ilara moved differently now. With each step, it felt as though the forest were walking with her, not beside her, within her. Her heartbeat had softened, falling into rhythm with the roots beneath the ground. The voices that once spoke in fragments and rhythm now echoed gently inside her mind, not with words, but with presence, like a story she no longer had to chase. When the cabin came into view, half wrapped in vines and washed in silver rain, it no longer looked lonely. It looked held, waiting. She stepped inside and let the door fall closed behind her. The sound of the rain shifted slightly, no longer muffled by walls, but transformed into something familiar. A song she now understood. She moved through the room without thought, shedding her coat, lighting the lamp, running her fingers along the wooden desk worn smooth by time. Everything was the same, and yet nothing was. She sat and opened a fresh page in her journal, but this time she did not sketch a plant or log a specimen. Her pen moved in curves and arcs, following a rhythm she felt rather than saw. The story she wrote now was not about botany or research. It was about memory, feeling, the language of leaves, the truths carried by rain. She wrote not to record, but to remember. And still, the rain whispered, but she no longer strained to hear it. She didn't need to. The forest lived inside her now. Its rhythm was her breath. Its memory was her heartbeat. Its stories moved through her veins like sap. In a living tree, she stepped onto the porch and looked out at the endless green, the canopy shimmering in mist and motion. A bird flew low across the path and disappeared into the trees. Somewhere deeper in the forest, thunder grumbled softly, as if dreaming. She whispered a thank you, not to the sky or the earth, but to all of it, to the voices in the roots, to the child she had been, to the grandmother who had known, to the mentor who had listened, and to herself for coming back. The forest did not answer with sound. It didn't need to. The hush of the rain said everything. She had gone far to find something ancient. But what she needed had never been lost. It had always been waiting, quietly, patiently, inside her. Night returned without fanfare, slipping through the trees on quiet feet, wrapping the forest in a deep blue hush. Ilara sat in her hammock once more, swaying gently with the rhythm of the rain. Her journal rested nearby, pages still open, but her pen had stilled. There was nothing more to write tonight, nothing more to name. She had found what she didn't know she had lost, and now all that remained was stillness. The forest moved around her, not with urgency, but with ease. Leaves shimmered with droplets, vines curled in their sleep, and far off in the canopy, a single bird gave one last call before tucking into its nest. The rain, ever faithful, sang on, no longer a whisper, no longer a mystery. Now it was simply part of her, part of everything. She closed her eyes and let the sounds drift through her. The patter of water on wood, the hush of breeze through moss, the distant pulse of thunder like a slow, steady drumbeat. It was not music, not exactly, but it was more than silence. It was presence. It was peace. The hammock rocked gently, swaying, as if cradled by the arms of the trees themselves. Ilara breathed in, slowly. The air was soft and rich with green. She breathed out, and her body released the last remnants of waking thought. She was no longer thinking, no longer remembering. She was simply here. You are the leaf, the rain seemed to say. You are the root and the river. You are the memory and the breath. You are safe. You are light. You can rest now. And so she did. The edges of the cabin blurred. The fire softened too, glowing embers. The sky outside became velvet, stitched with the quiet stars that only the trees could see. The journal, the lamp, the soft footprints across the wooden floor all faded into the hush. Only the sound of the rain remained, steady and sure, a lullaby for the world. And then there was only the quiet. The forest no longer spoke in rain or breath. The hammock lay still. The leaves did not rustle. Even the air, so often full of motion, had fallen into perfect stillness. Somewhere in the distance, a single owl called once low, round, and slow. The sound faded into the trees like a sigh returning home inside the cabin. Everything slept. The journal remained open, though no eyes would read it now. The lamp flickered once, then stilled, its glow sinking into the soft folds of shadow. Lara breathed slowly, deeply. The rhythm of the forest etched into her sleep. She did not dream in images or words. She dreamt in rain, in roots, in memory, and beyond the canopy, above the moss, beneath the soil. Something old and gentle stirred, as if smiling. The rainforest dreams and remembers you